Welcome, adventurers, to another enchanting episode of Lore Drop. I'm Dungeon Master Eguile.
And I'm D&D Wife, your guides to the hidden depths of the world of Extrayus.
Tonight, we unravel the secrets that lie beneath the surface of our homebrew campaign. We'll dive into the lore, the legends, and the magic that makes Extrayus so captivating.
We'll explore the stories behind the realms, the characters, and the world building that brings our adventures to life.
Whether you're a dungeon master seeking inspiration, a writer crafting your own fantasy worlds, or just a fan of immersive storytelling,
there's something here for you. Join us as we reveal the mysteries of Extrayus and share our creative journey with you.
Get ready for a new Lore Drop, where imagination meets creation. Let's embark on this magical adventure together. Welcome back to Lore Drop, everyone. Today we're kicking off an exciting new series where we'll be diving into the heart of each of the Mirren tribes, beginning first with the fierce and formidable Mir Shah. I'm your host, DM Eguile.
And I'm D&D Wife. We're so excited to finally explore the Mir Shah with you all, the matriarchal feline tribe whose strength and resilience help shape the Mirren culture. They've got such a fascinating history, and trust me, you're in for a treat.
That's right. We're going to dig into first the origins of the Mir Shah, the inspiration behind their warrior-like culture, and how they were the first tribe to bring any sort of unity amongst the Mirren. So grab your headphones, settle in, and let's journey to the lands of the Mir Shah. Now, obviously, when we first kind of came up with the Mirren, we had a lot to choose from.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of, because we kind of took the Mirren to be these different beast folk, and there's some from D&D, and there's some that we're creating all of our own. But the first one that we kind of built in was also kind of based around one of our player characters. So the first of the Mirren to really be developed were based around kind of the backstories of our players. And so that's why I always liked having the Mir Shah be kind of the first one. And they're kind of a mirror to the Tabaxi of the D&D 5e.
A little, but with a few significant differences.
With a lot of different. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's like, cat people are cat people. I mean, so it's like it's hard to kind of differentiate.
Right, and we've seen cat people all across media.
Right, and so for me, it really comes down, we always kind of like, I like to be kind of like, Dr. House, where it's like some random point or thing we'll pull from, and then we create something from all these random, and it sometimes forms something really cool. Yeah. And so, obviously, I wanted to start with the Tabaxi, and I've always felt like their role in D&D is always very minute, they're jungle cats, they're these smaller creatures, and their whole big thing is their speed. Yeah. Never strength, never anything like that. It's all they're dexterous. So I thought, hey, how about we, my big shtick as a dungeon master is always taking those things and spinning them on their top, right? So, if the creature is known for being very weak, then maybe now it's a lot stronger, but in a different, but using its weakness for strength. Yeah,
in a different capacity.
Right, and so I wanted it to make that be their focus, and so it's kind of like as a predator or a creature that's not quite high on the predator spectrum, like a hyena or a cheetah, right, they still are under the other apex cats.
They are.
They know they have their weaknesses, but they then adapted to base off of their skills. Hyena, they'll eat anything, right? So they're very much a kind of carrion type animal now, because they rely on scraps.
Yeah, or like some jungle cats have learned to jump on you from above because it's way easier to get prey that way.
And it's the same things with the type of bone structure in their mouths so they don't get the meat but they eat the bone, and stuff like that. So I wanted really that to be really focused on the Tabaxi, but obviously as the Mirren the Mir Shah, I really wanted that focus to be, okay, well now these are those kind of creatures that are now humanoid, that have that nature to it. Yeah. And so
they become more than what they were.
Right. And so the other thing I wanted to put, and that was just kind of a thought that I wanted, is I wanted to create, a matriarchal society. And it's really kind of through a lot of, the different kind of lore we've seen, things like the Amazonians of Themyscira, the Spartans of lore. And I kind of wanted to combine those aspects and like make it more of like peace with the nature, but still kind of like the battle,
a warrior society,
right, of the Spartans of the past. And so it really, I wanted to focus. And then where I got the whole battle maiden thing is that, I grew up, a child in the late 90s, early 2000s. So I grew up watching like Hercules and Xena, Warrior Princess, right? Lucy Lawless, back in the day.
Her.
And so I watched that because it really was this like strong female fighter who took on everyone. But it wasn't that it was just, oh, she magically has super strength, or oh, she's protected by something. It was always because of her using her abilities, using her tools, her weapons, her little like kunai things. She would spin and bounce off things and do all kinds of stuff. And so
she was really good on a horse,
right? And so it was always this cool, and she was always about like her little small crew. She never had like this huge army.
No.
It was usually her and like two other people.
She tried that before the show and it failed miserably, so she didn't like that.
I really liked that idea of, instead of warrior princess, it was more of battle maidens, and they're like these though they are still females, but they are these hardened warriors, but they still move with like a cat-like grace amongst the battlefield.
Just kind of like lionesses almost, where they're the ones who go hunting on a normal basis. They're the ones who are out there.
Yeah, and so because of that, like because of seeing those things, that's kind of what really pivoted me to be like, okay, in this society, the females have the more, agile, sleek body, whereas the males have just much more of a regular form, not really adjusted for like speed or strength.
Just a more possibly a more compact body.
In a sense that it was looked at, because obviously with the Mirren, all the Mirren tribes being such early in their development, none of them are going to have these like advanced caste or government systems. They're going to be based off of what they see visually to begin with. And so as I'll go in more, their culture really kind of imbibes that, in that it's not just this matriarchal, it's more of just a one for all kind of thing. And that's really kind of important. And really the whole point of the Mir Shah that I really wanted to do was being kind of the representative of the new world, right? So at the end of the day, as the story went, these were going to be our first of the ones that kind of started the rallying cry, essentially, right? So they were going to be, because we had talked and we kind of had to figure out a history, but how do you make a history for a bunch of creatures that were slowly evolving? Besides, okay, well, they're going to war for years and years and years
until they get
animals.
better. Yeah. We didn't quite want that necessarily.
Yeah, I didn't want them to be a violent, we really wanted to make them a dichotomy to like humans and be more of like, they may have warred, but it was always for resources, supplies.
For reasons,
it was never for territory, because the Mirren don't squabble for territory.
No, they all have their own spaces.
Yeah, that they are intrinsically, located to. So I really wanted them to be kind of this, that they are, they don't have magic, they don't have technology, but yet they're still so advanced to where even creatures or countries or groups that have these things still can see themselves being tested by the Mir Shah people.
Right.
And so, that's the big thing too, is I didn't want them to be just kind of this like face in the crowd, because obviously with most, we see it even in our own television, right? Like the Lion King is about the lions. Like it's not about the cheetahs.
No.
And the hyenas are viewed as a joke.
Right.
So there's always kind of a hierarchy. And I think really, this is that another inspiration, and it sounds funny, it's like Zootopia, right?
Yeah, same thing,
because that really kind of goes off of like what is a society when predator and prey kind of come in. But I wanted
try to coexist.
So I wanted to have more underdogs though, because obviously you're only going to have like two major factions, but then what are all the other
two
people
big
doing?
predator groups,
right,
usually
that are fighting, which we will go in more as we come on through these deep dives. But really it was more of like, they were the ones where it's, look, they're the under cat in this case, and they were the ones that first kind of recognized that you have to acknowledge your weakness
and
to
work
gain
with
strength.
it. Yeah.
And so I really, that was when we were talking about, okay, who would we start when we started making these tribes as kind of being that anchor, and the Mir Shah really were that kind of thing for us. And I always liked that, because really it was, the focus was, okay, if we, once we start these Mirren and we start building these, it's hard to start making them too different. And then it's like, okay, well, they're still the same kind of people, they're just different animals. And so I really wanted to be the focus of, okay, the first group we had wasn't just going to be this like authoritative, like us only, almost like xenophobic.
Yeah, like nobody but cat people.
Yeah, right. And so I really wanted to push that. The theme would also push that it's like it's a rarity to be rejecting unity kind of thing.
Yeah, they don't generally do that.
Right. And so I think I really pushed that within their culture itself. And as you know, as you being a player, this is probably one of the Mirren tribes that you as a player have experienced the most with. And I kind of say it like seeing it firsthand. But really what they are, you know, it's based off of, like I was saying, their physical abilities, with the males being more of a domestic kind of role, given that they are much smaller in form and strength.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that the females are these like large creatures that stand feet above. Yeah, that's a good one.
That's not necessarily what happens.
They are very the same. It's more of the musculature that kind of allows them to be a little faster.
The females are just naturally built for hunting, prowling.
Exactly. And so because of that, they really have done that. And because it still focuses on the cooperation, because really with all the Mirren tribes and all of their cultures, and as I talked in the very beginning of this kind of series, is that they're all oral traditions. So really it's less of a male-female kind of dichotomy for all the Mirrens, and more of a youth and old and the elders.
Passing on of the knowledge.
So it's more of the actual system, though matriarchal in like form and function. In actual the system, it's mostly based around the group of elders, and that's just anyone who happens to be older is
and
of value because they have the knowledge, they have the stories, they can tell you of certain ways to do things. So it really is, though, you know, you look at it and being, okay, well, obviously the females protect, it is still kind of has this pseudo government republic based on age, where it's like, okay, then they're represented by the oldest of the tribes. And that's kind of their ruling kind of body that allows them to both have unity and also still have kind of a cooperative board amongst themselves, right? So obviously it's like, okay, the females are stronger. That obviously can be more of a subjugation, like we've seen in comedies like Futurama and stuff like that, where they're like, oh, we don't need men, wipe them out. But then that causes problems.
That does.
So the idea being that it's because the elders have that knowledge, they have that understanding that that's the actual ruling body. Though obviously through force, the kind of battle maidens are kind of the controlling feature.
Yeah, they could be in charge if they want.
But it's always goes back to that thing with the Mirren, is that they don't have this drive for like conquest that the Humes do.
Yeah, there's no need to be the person in charge.
They want to have their lineage grow, go on to the next generation, and just keep existing. They're not trying to, you know, rule the world, which really I think creates that difference, you know, because it is so cooperation based. You know, to the point where in the beginning, you know, when they tried to make this large colony, it was kind of unsuccessful. And the reason why is that in this time, they occupied what is called the northern grasslands. And it's the kind of northern ridge in the middle of the continent.
To the east of the continent.
On the eastern side, right? And so in their area, the native kind of flora and fauna, the animals there, adapt very quickly and become, essentially, the more that group up, the stronger they become. They can become these large packs. And so as the Mir Shah were struggling in the beginning, as they reached this like new sentience, this new consciousness, they kind of stuck together as in groups. But what this allowed was these creatures to slowly gain in strength around them, become harder and harder and harder. I think of them kind of like in like old Tremors, right? The like the mode of the ones that could walk and be bipedal, and then like they just got more and more, and as they eat, they just grow and grow.
They could just get bigger.
So it's more of, it's easy if you can keep their numbers low. So what they ended up discovering is that they needed to have a much more nomadic lifestyle, because they were constantly being overwhelmed by these creatures just day in and day out, because the creatures constantly would gather at one point. So they essentially were figuring that they would need to separate themselves into different, what they would call way stations. And what this would be is each of these way stations would house the old and the young. And they would be spread, and they would be the elder would teach the young and let them learn the techniques. And then what would be going on is there was a kind of a moving faction of the Mir Shah themselves. And what this was is this was the group of all the warriors, the young adults, all of kind of the strongest and hardiest of the group. And what they would do is they would roll constantly. They wouldn't stay in one place for more than a day, and they would constantly move, cutting the nature and the foliage back and the wildlife, keeping the numbers low and constantly chasing them.
To keep the way stations safe.
The way stations stay. Basically running the entire of their territory, stopping at the way stations in order to gather supplies, and then moving on from way station to way station. So you essentially had 5 mini states and one kind of rolling state that operated independently. And what they came up with is they viewed this whole unified grouping as Shalatam. And in their language, that means one family. Because no matter what, even though as the time and the generations went, and as each of the way stations kind of slowly evolved different philosophies, because now rather than having all the elders in one location, they're now having them split amongst. So what you started seeing is that each of these different way stations kind of started developing their own beliefs and philosophies, creating this very multicultural aesthetic to the Mir Shah people. They were one of the first Mirrens to begin worshiping the day and night cycle, with one way station viewing the night as being this protector, as the beasts tend not to attack at night.
Yeah, because they're all asleep too.
Because they're all asleep. And then another way station viewing the sun as being the ultimate protector, in that it's the sun because it brings life and everything. And so some of the early religious kind of upbringings and development started also in the Mir Shah. As the elders of these different groups kind of had their own philosophies, we saw each of these way stations culminate into kind of a different culture group. But then as Shalatam, this rolling group of the most, the most strong and the most ready to go, are each learning from each one of these way stations and packs.
Picking up more and more skills.
So the Shalatam, this rolling group of nomadic ones, are becoming even more powerful. Because instead they're learning pieces from each of these, gaining that different pieces of knowledge, which is what gave them and started building that strength unbeknownst to them.
And they can keep the way stations, I imagine, also up to date because they bring the knowledge of the other way stations with them as well.
Now, obviously, it somewhat, as much as like you would say,
because they only stay for a little bit,
right?
Because
it's the same thing you could say like back in the West when you'd have different communities traveling from campsite.
You'd get a little bit.
It starts, one or two people may hear the word or whatnot. But it is something where there would at least be some kind of connection, because no matter what, even though they had differing beliefs, they always believed themselves to be one group. So even as they saw differences in like even their coats and what they looked like, they still always viewed themselves as one people. Because really, it kind of just shows that the Mir Shah have always been this kind of group of people that have been willing to accept new things. And that was the focus that we wanted them to be, because they're kind of our figurehead for the Mirren people. And so because of that, it needed to be kind of the ones that always embodied what I put as hope. And that is kind of their gift. All of
possibility.
All of the Mirren are blessed in certain ways, and they're all gifted certain abilities. And so for the Tabaxi, it's really just that sense of hope. For the Mir Shah, is really based off of the fact that they just always have hope for their people, and that sense of that they are the one that doesn't feel that they are reluctant to work with another tribe.
Yeah, they'll reach out.
They'll reach out when need be. Now, obviously, it takes them a while to realize this and understand that they are not the only ones developing. They're not the only ones struggling, which is to be understood.
Right.
I mean, new
tough
cultures,
when you're isolated.
I mean, we can only imagine when, like, the new cultures and new countries were, coming together before they started warring. What exactly were they doing? And they're just saying, "Hey, look, lights came on over there. I wonder what's over there.
Is there something over there?"
Of course, we know later it leads to war, violence, and carnage. But that's history
Separate.
And all that kind of stuff. But really, that's their kind of their special power, is that they do have this willingness to take in anyone to be part of their family. They believe that that's kind of the message of Shalatam, is that anyone or anything
can increase the strength,
can be Shalatam, because they view of adapting all different techniques and abilities. And so what ends up happening is, as we see the kind of lines be opened up, as the Mirren start kind of discovering one another and their areas and kind of the advancements, it's first kind of initially kind of a watching, you know, they see and they observe and they try to copy. And so that's really where the battle maidens initially started to develop. The Mir Shah, the early Mir Shah warriors would watch the other Mirren practice and fight from a distance. And instead of obviously receiving that training, they would attempt to copy it in their own ways, adapting a style that fits more to them.
That was all their own.
Right, because obviously they are not this overpowering kind of nature. And
they can't strike like an elephant or
or a lion
or a moose.
Or they can't fly,
an elk,
you know. And so their closest cousin, the Romar tribe, they had observed them. And the Romar tribe at this point had started developing weaponry and iron and steel and all that.
Yeah,
and so,
they're the more lion folk for those of you listening.
Which obviously we'll get into them in the next few episodes. But really what it is that because of that, they saw the usage of kind of like using weapons at that point. And now they adapted. They were really that first to adapt an entire fighting style around. And so the way that they kind of organize themselves is they operate in these numbers of 3, believing that that's kind of like
Groups
that
of
safety.
3.
It's the triangle formation kind of thing. If you got the triangle, you're protected.
Right.
But the way they operate is that by using their extremely strong legs, they are just leapers. You know, they can run for short amounts of
Good
distances,
bursts,
but they're more about leaping from place to place.
That's how they fight.
So what they do is they leap off of things to kind of launch themselves, almost to create the illusion of flight.
Yeah, and off of each other, which is the biggest
exactly.
thing.
And so
It's why they go in groups.
They'll position themselves in certain groups so that they can launch off of one another.
Think deadly cheerleaders.
As they're able to kind of launch off the backs of one another as they are in combat, off of trees, buildings, other enemies, to where they are moving so fast because they are almost essentially pinballing between location to location, moving ever faster the quicker they jump, using their kind of enhanced intelligence to really kind of spot the next location
where they
jump,
need to go. You
know, project the trajectory and then launch themselves at like, you know, lightning break speeds. And because of this is what started to change the game for them within the cultures of the other Mirrens, because obviously you know, raw strength gets you so far, but organized combat and that ability to be fast and slowly tack something down started to raise the Mir Shah status within the Mirrens. They were no longer just viewed as this lesser tribe, these smaller creatures that were a part of the system that was basically, you know, you stay there, and because the Mirren never leave, they were never ever going to be a threat. But now, as their population began to boom, now that the local wildlife is being kept in check, they are now farming that wildlife for meat and proteins and leathers and skins and everything like that. Because now they're able to keep it under control. And so now, because of that, it opened up a very unique dynamic for the Mirren, because obviously, like, animals start to notice other animals coming into territory. But when it's a situation where these animals also know that none of them will ever leave said territory, a certain spark changed everything. So within the Mir Shah people, they kind of saw eventually the stagnation, right? This idea that we can only get so good from watching
within ourselves
for so long. It's like the idea of like, you can shadow box.
Sure.
You can shadow box for years.
All you want.
But if you've never taken a punch or you've never actually gone in the ring and trained, it doesn't make a difference.
You don't know what it's like.
So it was this kind of unique push given to their kind of gift for that compassion, that willingness to kind of reach out for their other kin. They were the first ones to actually leave their physical territory, to leave the zone in which they are called to stay.
Completely unheard of.
And enter into a new territory, in which that was of the Romar. Now, the Romar being much a amalgamation of like the Leonin of D&D 5e. But very, very different, as they're split into many
their own
groups.
thing. Yeah, they're their own thing.
But being the closest kind of cousin relative, and as the Mir Shah had already been kind of secretly watching them for all this time, they began to enter into that under the pretense of cooperation, of understanding, of wishing to become stronger. As always, it's taken and misunderstood because anything that's a new thing and it was viewed as an act of invasion, an act of taking,
and it could have gone much worse.
A territorial battle of animals, and a few years of conflict does occur between these two tribes as they are essentially fighting over a miscommunication with the Mir Shah constantly trying to, extend the olive branch and say that they are not here, with the Romar in justification defending their territory.
We've never had anyone leave and enter another territory,
as
so
well
why
as just
are you
them
doing
being
that?
such a prideful territorial Mirren themselves, which we'll get into when we touch on them next. But it is that thing where it's going to face a lot of repetition. It's going to have to push hard forward. But over time, eventually, essentially, with the Romar being such battle-hardened warriors, starting to realize that they aren't being essentially fought against.
Nobody's hurting them with the intention of taking them out.
Yeah, like that bloodthirsty thing that animals tend to know, right?
And there's no
animals
feel for
innately
conquest.
Know when they're about to be killed or something wants to kill them. And so once that tension de-escalated over time, they actually started to unify, which this is what started the entire chain of everything for the Mirren, which is what we're going to get on as we do more of these lore drops. As because of this unity, it started a new focus, a focus of connection, which the Romar would take that baton and go even further with it as it goes. But really that spark of the Mir Shah doing that is what really caused this. And so what that did is now the already powerful battle maidens are now armed. They now have armors they never once had before. And what they saw was much like we saw in our early histories where, countries would come together, they would offer up people or, units or teachers for the different sides. And so in exchange for this kind of armament and weapons, the Romar would send their young to learn the tactics of the Mir Shah and learn amongst the people and create kind of this, uneasy alliance, as obviously anytime you are sending one of your own away from your
especially,
tribe.
It's difficult.
But the idea being that this was essentially the growth of this new kind of connection. So now it's not only are the Romar, who are physically powerful but not very tactically powerful, have generations in the future that are going to learn these techniques, that are going to then take them back to their people one day and watch them grow. So it really was that beginning of kind of the unification. Now we're going to go through each one. We're going to see how each one goes. And obviously with any kind of thing like that, there will be roadblocks. There will be hurdles. But the Mir Shah really focus on that kind of thing. And that really, like I always point out, is their greatest strength, is unity. And that compassion when it comes to not only themselves, but others. But that's really kind of that major focus when we want to start looking at all of these. And so
they each bring something to the table.
Right. And so obviously as we go with these deep dives, we can't go into every single thing about all of these, but we're giving you a little bit of a tense. And this is at least to give some backstory as before we get into the full history of the Mirren, which is a very exciting time.
Right. Because you got to know the different groups first before we get into the big story.
Yeah. And that's the thing with homebrew too, is we're also trying to show that it really can just be these kind of what looks to be kind of random ideas and thoughts create new things, as the Mir Shah have now become their own culture and people when really they just started out as just being kitty people.
Meow.
But that's really the important thing. And so check out for our next one. So next one, we will be rolling into the Romar tribe, and we're going to see exactly how that push of unity moved into another tribe and started kind of this domino effect, and how exactly what exactly was going on with the Romar when the Mir Shah.
What happened after the olive branch?
Right. But that's going to wrap up our deep dive today into the Mir Shah tribe. We hope you enjoyed learning about the resilience and traditions of this incredible Mirren clan.
Thanks so much for tuning in. The Mir Shah are just the beginning. There's so much more to explore with each Mirren tribe and their unique cultures.
So remember again, be sure to join us next time as we dive into the history and mysteries of the Romar tribe. Don't forget to like, review, and come hang out with us on Discord to keep the conversation going.
Until then, keep adventuring, everyone.
Have a good one. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Lore Drop. We hope you enjoyed exploring the rich lore and magic of Extrayus with us.
But the adventure doesn't have to end here. Join our Couple of Nerds Discord community to dive deeper into the world of Extrayus, share your own stories, and connect with fellow adventurers.
And don't forget to check out the Couple of Nerds YouTube channel. There you'll find all our content, from thrilling campaign highlights to miniature painting tutorials and more.
We love hearing from you, so be sure to leave your thoughts, questions, and ideas. Who knows, your input might just inspire our next episode.
Thank you for joining us on this journey through Extrayus. Until next time, keep your imagination alive and your dice ready.
Stay curious, stay creative, and may your adventures be ever wondrous.
See you in the next Lore Drop.